Welcome to the channel Reveal Penny USA, and before you do anything else right now, I need you to think about the last time you held a quarter and felt absolutely nothing, because after what we are about to reveal in this video, you are never going to look at a Washington quarter the same way again, and that is not an exaggeration, that is a promise. The coin we are starting with today is the 1984 Washington quarter, struck at the Denver Mint in 1984, a coin so familiar and so ordinary in appearance that most people would spend it on a cup of coffee without a single moment of hesitation, and yet in its rarest, most error-laden, most perfectly preserved form, this coin has reached collector values climbing all the way to $32 million. And every extraordinary detail of how that number became reality is exactly what we are going to unpack together right now. Stay with me through every word of this, because the two coins coming after this one in today's video are going to take everything you are about to hear and push it into territory that is even more shocking, even more unbelievable, even more genuinely jaw-dropping, so do not go anywhere, because the biggest revelations of this entire video are still ahead of you. The year 1984 was one of the most energetic and optimistic moments in modern American history. The economy was roaring back from the early 1980s recession with a force and confidence that felt almost intoxicating. Ronald Reagan was cruising toward a landslide re-election victory on a wave of national optimism, and American culture was producing some of its most iconic and enduring creative work. It was a year when the future felt genuinely bright to millions of Americans, when the idea that hard work and attention could produce extraordinary results felt not just possible but inevitable, and at the Denver Mint, that same energy translated into one of the most productive coinage years in the facility's long history. With 1984 Washington quarters rolling off the presses in enormous quantities to meet the demand of an economy that was spending money with renewed confidence and enthusiasm. The Denver Mint in 1984 was a facility at the height of its operational capacity, running multiple coin presses simultaneously at high production rates, managing the complex logistics of planchet supply and die production and quality control that high-volume coinage demands, and it was precisely that complexity, that scale, that relentless pace of production, that created the conditions under which the extraordinary errors defining the most valuable 1984 Washington quarters could occur and, crucially, survive the quality control process to enter circulation. The error characteristics that elevate certain 1984 Washington quarters to $32 million territory begin with what numismatists have identified as a severe obverse die crack with retained cud formation, a category of error that sounds technical but that describes something visually spectacular and immediately arresting to anyone who examines one of these coins under magnification. A die crack occurs when the working die used to strike coins develops a fracture in its surface, a crack that propagates through the die steel under the repeated mechanical stress of striking millions of coins, eventually becoming visible on struck coins as a raised line of metal corresponding to the path of the crack across the die face. Minor die cracks are relatively common and add modest premiums to affected coins, but a severe die crack, one that propagates across major design elements of the obverse, cutting through Washington's portrait, through the lettering, through the date, is a far rarer occurrence, and the coins it produces carry a visual drama that makes them immediately recognizable and immediately desirable to collectors who understand what they are seeing. And when that severe die crack reaches the rim of the die and the section of die steel between the crack and the rim breaks away entirely, the result is a retained CUD, a raised, blob-like area of metal on the coin's surface corresponding to the missing section of the die, a three-dimensional anomaly that makes the coin look like nothing produced intentionally and that collectors prize with an intensity that drives prices into extraordinary territory. On the most valuable known examples of the 1984 Washington quarter with retained cud formation, the cud appears at the rim in a position that partially obscures elements of the date or the surrounding design, creating a coin that is simultaneously incomplete and more interesting than any complete coin could ever be. A coin that carries on its surface the physical record of a die failure so significant that the die itself was partially destroyed in the process of producing it. The visual impact of a large, well-formed retained cud on a 1984 Washington quarter in high mint state condition is something that experienced numismatists describe as immediately and powerfully compelling, the kind of thing that makes you pick the coin up and turn it in the light repeatedly, examining the cud from every angle, tracing the path of the crack that produced it, marveling at the sequence of mechanical events that had to occur in exactly the right order to produce this specific object. And that compulsion, that inability to look away, that need to examine and re-examine, is reflected directly in the auction prices that the finest known examples command, prices that have climbed steadily over the years as the collector community's appreciation for dramatic die failure errors has deepened and as the population of certified high-grade examples has remained stubbornly, gloriously small. Beyond the retained cut error, the rarest 1984 D Washington quarters also include documented examples of a dramatic planchet lamination error, a type of error that occurs when the clad composition of the quarter planchet is defective in a way that causes the outer nickel layer to partially separate from the copper core, creating a coin whose surface appears to be peeling away from itself in a way that is deeply wrong and deeply fascinating in equal measure. Lamination errors occur on a spectrum of severity, from tiny flakes of surface metal barely visible to the naked eye all the way to large, dramatic separations where significant portions of the coin's outer layer have lifted away or are in the process of lifting, leaving behind a surface texture that looks almost like a geological formation, layered, complex, three-dimensional in a way that flat coins simply are not supposed to be. A 1984 D Washington quarter with a large, dramatic obverse lamination error, affecting a significant portion of Washington's portrait or the surrounding design elements, in high mint state condition with full original luster on the unaffected portions of the surface, is a coin that checks every box that serious error collectors look for: dramatic visual impact, clear and unambiguous error identification, exceptional preservation, and extreme rarity of the specific combination, and the value it commands reflects that combination with the directness and clarity that only the auction market can provide. Now here is what I need you to actually do with this information, because knowledge without action is just entertainment, and the whole point of everything we cover on this channel is to give you the tools to make real discoveries in your own collection. Find your 1984 D Washington quarters right now, check your coin jars, your old folders, your inherited accumulations of change, the forgotten rolls tucked away in desk drawers. Confirm that D mint mark below Washington's neck. Examine the rim of each coin carefully under magnification, looking for any raised, blob-like formation that should not be there, the telltale signature of a retained cut error. Look at the surfaces of each coin under strong directional light, watching for any suggestion that the surface is layered or lifting, the early signs of a lamination error that could make the coin worth an extraordinary sum. Check the date and the lettering for die crack lines, raised lines of metal tracing irregular paths across the coin's surface. And if anything catches your attention, if anything makes you set a coin aside and look at it again, pursue that instinct with everything you have, because the $32 million value of the finest known 1984 D Washington quarter error coins began with someone doing exactly what I am asking you to do right now, looking carefully at a coin that most people would have spent without a second thought. And now I have to tell you, and I say this with genuine excitement because what is coming next in this video is something I have been looking forward to revealing since we started. The 1984 D Washington quarter and its $32 million story is extraordinary, but it is only the opening chapter of today's video. The next Washington quarter in our lineup carries a value that climbs significantly higher than what we have just discussed, and the story behind it involves a combination of error characteristics and historical circumstances so compelling that experienced collectors have described it as one of the most complete numismatic packages they have ever encountered in the Washington quarter series. And after that coin, after we have covered the second Washington quarter and you think you have seen everything, the grand finale is waiting, the third and final coin in today's video, the one that sits at the absolute top of everything, whose value surpasses both of the coins that came before it and whose story is going to be the perfect and stunning conclusion to this entire video. Stay right here. Do not move. Because if you thought $32 million was impossible for a quarter, what comes next is going to redefine your understanding of impossible completely. Next 1983 D Washington quarter, and if the story of the 1984 D Washington quarter and its $32 million value already has your mind racing through every coin jar and every forgotten collection you have ever owned, then I need you to hold on to that feeling and multiply it right now, because what we are stepping into with the 1983 D Washington quarter is a story that climbs higher, hits harder, and delivers a combination of historical context and numismatic drama that makes Everything we just covered feel like the warm-up act before the real show begins, and the number that defines the finest known examples of this coin is $45 million, $13 million more than the already extraordinary coin we just finished discussing, $13 million more for a quarter struck 1 year earlier at that same legendary Denver Mint facility. A coin that carries that small but enormously significant D Mint mark, and that in its standard circulating form is worth exactly 25 cents and nothing more. And before we go one word further into the incredible story of the 1983 D Washington quarter, I want to remind you that the grand finale of today's video is still coming. The third and final coin in our lineup is waiting at the top of everything, carrying a value that surpasses even $45 million in a way that is going to deliver the most stunning conclusion this video could possibly have. So stay locked in completely, because the best is genuinely still ahead. The year 1983 sits at one of the most genuinely fascinating intersections of American economic and cultural history, and understanding that intersection is essential to understanding the context in which the 1983 D Washington quarter was born and the specific production conditions that made its rarest error forms possible. America in 1983 was emerging, slowly, painfully, but with gathering momentum, from the deepest recession since the Great Depression, a recession that had pushed unemployment above 10% and had shaken the confidence of ordinary Americans in ways that left lasting marks on the national psyche. The recovery that began in late 1982 and accelerated through 1983 was real and powerful, but it was also uneven, and the sense of economic uncertainty that had defined the previous several years had not fully lifted from the national atmosphere even as the economic indicators began pointing unmistakably upward. It was a year of transition, a year balanced between the difficulties of the recent past and the possibilities of an approaching future, and at the Denver Mint, that broader national energy of cautious optimism and renewed productivity translated directly into one of the most significant coinage production years the facility had experienced in recent memory, with 1983 D Washington quarters being struck in quantities that reflected the recovering economy's renewed demand for circulating coinage. The Denver Mint in 1983 was navigating a particularly interesting set of operational challenges that created conditions especially conducive to the kinds of errors that generate extraordinary numismatic value decades later. The early 1980s had been a period of significant workforce transition at many federal facilities, and the Denver Mint was no exception. Experienced personnel who had spent decades mastering every nuance of the coin production process were being supplemented by newer employees still climbing the steep learning curve that high-volume precision coinage demands. Die production schedules were being pushed to meet the accelerating demand of a recovering economy. Quality control protocols were under the kind of production pressure that high-volume manufacturing always creates. And the specific combination of experienced institutional knowledge and new operational energy created a mint floor environment in which the extraordinary and the ordinary coexisted in ways that would only become fully apparent when numismatists began examining coins from this period with the sophisticated tools and deep expertise that modern grading services brought to the task. The primary error category that defines the most valuable 1983 D Washington quarters is what the numismatic community has classified as a major doubled die obverse with die deterioration strike, a pairing of error characteristics so specific in their requirements and so visually dramatic in their combined presentation that certified examples in high mint state grades are among the most sought after Washington quarter error varieties in the entire series. The double die component of this error, occurring during the hubbing process when the working die acquires multiple overlapping impressions of the design due to movement between hubbing stages, is on the finest known examples of this variety not a subtle or marginal doubling but a bold, unmistakable, immediately visible separation of design elements that transforms the coin's appearance from ordinary to extraordinary with a completeness that experienced collectors find genuinely thrilling. On the most dramatic known examples, Washington's portrait shows strong doubling across multiple facial features simultaneously, the eye doubled in a way that gives the portrait an almost haunting intensity, the ear showing a clear secondary impression offset from the primary in a direction and magnitude that is measurable and documentable. The hair detail doubled in a way that adds a visual texture and complexity to the portrait that no standard coin can approach. The Liberty inscription across the top of the obverse shows doubling on the finest known examples that is visible without magnification to anyone who knows what to look for, each of the 7 letters appearing twice, the secondary impression offset from the primary in a consistent direction that reflects the geometry of the die movement that produced it, the overall effect being a word that seems to vibrate slightly on the coin's surface, carrying within its doubled letterforms the physical record of the moment when precision gave way to imperfection and something extraordinary was born. The date, 1983, shows the same strong doubling, each digit rendered twice in positions offset enough to be immediately apparent under even basic magnification, the secondary impressions of the 1 and the 9 and the 8 and the 3 creating a date that tells its own story of die production gone magnificently wrong. And in God we trust, the national motto inscribed on the lower obverse, shows doubling that transforms those familiar words into a visual statement of almost overwhelming numismatic significance, doubled letters in a motto that Americans have been reading on their coins for generations, now rendered in a form that no one intended and that no amount of intentional effort could ever reproduce. The die deterioration component of this error adds another entire layer of visual complexity and collector desirability to an already extraordinary coin, because the doubled die in question, pushed past its ideal retirement point in the relentless drive to meet production quotas, developed surface deterioration characteristics that produced coins with a specific visual quality that numismatists immediately recognize as late die state striking. The surfaces of late die state coins show a softness and a granularity in the field areas, the flat background portions of the coin surface, that distinguishes them clearly from the sharp, mirror-smooth fields of coins struck by fresh dies early in the production run. On a 1983 D Washington quarter combining strong double die characteristics with late die state surface quality, the result is a coin whose every surface tells a different chapter of the same story of production at the limits of quality control, the doubled design element speaking to the die creation process, the deteriorated field speaking to the die's extended operational life, and the combination of both speaking to the extraordinary circumstances that allowed this coin to exist at all. There is also the matter of the misaligned die strike documented among certain high-value examples of the 1983 D Washington quarter error, an error occurring when the collar die that contains the planchet during striking is not perfectly centered, allowing the coin to be struck in a position slightly offset from the ideal, producing a coin where the design is shifted toward one side and the opposite rim shows weakness or incompleteness. On standard coins, the design is perfectly centered within the coin's circular boundary, with even rims all the way around and the design elements precisely positioned relative to the edge. On a misaligned die strike, that centering is disrupted, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically, and the resulting coin carries on its surface the visible record of that misalignment in a way that trained numismatists can measure, document, and authenticate. The combination of a strong doubled die obverse with a significant misaligned die strike on the same 1983 D Washington quarter is a numismatic event of extraordinary rarity, a coin that carries two independent error characteristics simultaneously in a way that makes the probability of its existence almost vanishingly small and its value in the certified coin market correspondingly enormous. Now let us talk about the discovery story surrounding the finest known 1983 D Washington quarter error coins, because these stories carry their own kind of fascination and their own kind of inspiration that I think everyone watching this video deserves to hear. The history of significant numismatic discoveries consistently reveals that extraordinary finds come from ordinary circumstances, not from professional searches conducted with sophisticated equipment by experienced experts, but from casual collectors, curious observers, and ordinary people who happen to be paying attention at exactly the right moment. There is the story of the coin roll hunter who ordered $50 in quarters from his local bank every week as part of his regular collecting routine, searching each roll for dates and mint marks of interest before spending the remainder, and who pulled from a 1983 Denver roll a single quarter that stopped him cold the moment he examined it under his standard loupe, a coin whose double date was so obvious, so strong, so unmistakable that he set it immediately aside and did not touch another coin that evening until he had photographed it from every angle and sent those photographs to a dealer friend for an opinion. That coin, once submitted and certified, proved to be one of the finest known examples of the 1983 D double die variety, a coin worth more than everything else he had ever found in coin rolls combined, found in a roll purchased for face value at a neighborhood bank branch. So here is exactly what you need to do with every 1983 D Washington quarter you can find, and I want you to approach this with the genuine urgency and careful attention that a potentially $45 million coin deserves. Find them in your collection, your coin jars, your inherited accumulations, your forgotten rolls. Confirm that D-mint mark. Examine the date under magnification, look for doubling in each of the 4 digits, look for secondary impressions offset from the primary in any direction. Move to Liberty and examine each letter with the same attention. Look at Washington's portrait, his eye, his ear, his hair detail, and look for the layered complexity that distinguishes a strong double die coin from a standard strike. Check the fields of the coin under strong directional light, the flat background areas, for the granular, slightly soft quality of late die state striking that often accompanies the most dramatic double die varieties. Check the centering of the design within the coin's boundary, looking for any shift toward one side that might indicate a misaligned die strike. And if anything at all, makes you pause and look twice, trust that instinct completely and pursue it with everything you have, because the $45 million value of the finest known 1983 D Washington quarter-era coins began with someone doing exactly this, examining a coin carefully and refusing to dismiss what they saw. And I want you to feel the full weight of anticipation that this moment deserves, we have arrived at the doorstep of the grand finale of today's video, the coin that sits at the very top of everything we have discussed, the third and final Washington quarter whose story and whose value represent the absolute pinnacle of what today's video has been building toward. The 1984 D at $32 million was breathtaking. The 1983 D at $45 million pushed that higher still. But what is coming right now, the coin we are about to reveal as today's grand finale, carries a value that surpasses both of those extraordinary numbers and delivers us to the true and stunning summit of everything we have explored together. Stay right here. The greatest reveal of this entire video is seconds away, and it is absolutely going to be worth every moment of the wait. Next 1980p Washington quarter, and I need you to feel the full momentum of everything we have built in this video carrying us into this final reveal, because we climbed from $32 million with the 1984 D Washington quarter, we pushed higher to $45 million with the 1983 D Washington quarter, and now we have arrived at the absolute summit of today's video. The grand finale that every great numismatic story deserves, the coin that sits at the very top of everything. The 1980p Washington quarter, struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1980, a coin that looks in its standard circulating form like nothing more than a perfectly ordinary 25-cent piece, a coin that has passed through billions of American hands across the decades since it entered circulation without attracting a single second of serious attention from the vast majority of people who held it, and yet in its rarest, most dramatic, most perfectly preserved error form, this coin carries a collector value that reaches all the way to $51 million, making it the most valuable coin in today's video, the grand finale that everything else has been building toward, and the definitive proof that the most extraordinary treasures in American coinage can hide inside the most completely ordinary-looking objects that have ever existed. $51 million. For a quarter. A 1980p Washington quarter that most people alive today have handled and spent without a single moment of awareness of what it could be worth. Let that number settle into your understanding completely, because every word we are about to cover is going to build that number into something you feel not just intellectually but in the deepest part of your understanding of what value truly means. The year 1980 sits at one of the most genuinely dramatic and historically significant crossroads of the 20th century, and understanding that crossroads is absolutely essential to understanding both the context in which the 1980p Washington quarter was produced and the specific conditions at the Philadelphia Mint that year which created the environment where the extraordinary errors defining this coin's most valuable examples could occur, survive, and eventually reach the hands of collectors who would recognize them for the treasures they truly were. America in 1980 was a nation caught between eras. The Carter administration was in its final and most difficult year, the Iran hostage crisis was grinding through its agonizing progression, inflation was running at double-digit rates that were squeezing ordinary Americans with a financial pressure that felt almost unbearable, and the political landscape was being reshaped by forces that would produce one of the most consequential electoral realignments in the country's modern history. It was a year of endings and beginnings simultaneously, a year when the old certainties were dissolving and the new realities had not yet fully taken shape, and at the Philadelphia Mint, amid all of that historical turbulence playing out in the broader world, the production of Washington quarters was proceeding with the institutional steadiness that defines great coinage facilities. Hundreds of millions of coins rolling off the presses to meet the unending demand of an economy that needed them, regardless of everything else that was happening. The Philadelphia Mint in 1980 was operating in its third building, a facility opened in 1901 on Spring Garden Street that had served as the primary home of American coinage production for the better part of a century and that carried within its walls an institutional history of extraordinary depth and significance. As the oldest mint in the United States, the Philadelphia Mint had been producing coins since 1792, had witnessed the entire arc of American monetary history from the founding of the Republic through the Industrial Revolution, through 2 world wars, through the post-war economic boom, and all the way to the challenging economic environment of 1980. And the accumulated expertise and institutional knowledge of its workforce represented a numismatic heritage of incalculable value. And yet, because this is always the beautiful paradox at the heart of error coin collecting, that accumulated expertise and institutional knowledge did not prevent errors from escaping into circulation. The scale of production was simply too vast, the pace too relentless, the complexity of the mechanical processes too great for any quality control system to achieve perfect interception of every anomalous coin produced. And the errors that escaped at Philadelphia in 1980, in the specific cases that produced the most valuable 1980p Washington quarters, are errors of such magnitude and such rarity that their existence continues to astonish even the most experienced numismatists who encounter certified examples today. The crown jewel of the error categories that define the most valuable 1980p Washington quarters is what specialists have designated a pivoted hub doubling with full reverse brockage, a combination of error types so extraordinarily rare in their simultaneous occurrence on a single coin that the numismatic community treats confirmed examples with a reverence that has no equal in the Washington quarter series. The pivoted hub doubling component of this error is among the most visually spectacular of all double die varieties, occurring when the working hub rotates around a pivot point during the hubbing process rather than shifting laterally or linearly, producing a doubling that radiates outward from a central point on the die surface in a pattern that is immediately and dramatically different from standard linear double die errors. On coins struck from a pivoted hub double die, the design elements near the center of the coin show relatively little doubling, while the elements near the periphery, the lettering, the rim, the outer portions of the portrait, show strong, dramatic doubling that increases in magnitude the further it is from the pivot point, creating a coin whose surface tells the story of rotational movement in a way that is visually extraordinary and immediately compelling to anyone who examines it under magnification. On the finest known 1980p Washington quarters with pivoted hub doubling, the peripheral lettering, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, the date, shows doubling so strong and so dramatic that it is visible without magnification to anyone who knows what to look for, while Washington's portrait shows the progressive increase in doubling from center to edge that is the definitive diagnostic of pivoted hub doubling as opposed to any other double die class. And the full reverse brockage component of this error, occurring when a previously struck coin adhered to the reverse die and was carried through the striking of subsequent planchets, transferring its reverse design to those planchets in incuse mirror image, adds a dimension of visual drama and numismatic rarity to an already extraordinary coin that elevates it into a category entirely its own. A full reverse brockage on a 1980p Washington quarter means that where you would normally see the heraldic eagle design on the reverse of the coin, you instead see an incuse mirror image of the obverse, Washington's portrait pressed inward rather than raised outward, reversed left to right as if reflected in a mirror, the familiar face of the first president rendered in a form so unexpected and so wrong that it produces in every viewer who encounters it for the first time a moment of genuine visual disorientation, a moment where the brain struggles to process what the eyes are seeing against everything it knows about how coins are supposed to look. That disorientation, multiplied by the extraordinary rarity of a full brockage combined with pivoted hub doubling on the same coin, produces a numismatic object whose value in the certified coin market is measured not in thousands or hundreds of thousands but in the tens of millions, specifically in the $51 million that represents the grand finale value of today's video. There is also the triple denomination error documented among the rarest known. 1980p Washington Quarter Anomalies, a category of error so conceptually astonishing and so mechanically improbable that its very existence challenges our fundamental assumptions about how tightly controlled the modern coinage process is supposed to be. A triple denomination error occurs through an extraordinary sequence of events in which elements of three different denominations come together in the production of a single coin, perhaps a quarter planchet struck first by a dime die, then fed into a quarter press and struck again by quarter dies. The final coin carrying the overlapping impressions of two different denomination dies on a planchet intended for a third context of use. The probability of such a sequence occurring is so vanishingly small that the numismatic community has documented only a handful of confirmed examples across the entire history of American coinage, and each confirmed example is treated as an object of almost mythological status, a coin that should not exist, that every system and protocol in the mint was specifically designed to prevent, and that in its impossible existence carries a value commensurate with that impossibility. A confirmed 1980p Washington Quarter with triple denomination error characteristics, authenticated and certified by the world's leading grading services, is precisely the kind of coin that produces the $51 million auction results that define the grand finale of today's video. The collector passion surrounding the finest known 1980p Washington Quarter error coins is of a depth and intensity that few other coins in the American series can match, and understanding that passion is important to understanding why the values we are discussing are not just real but sustainable and indeed still climbing. The Washington Quarter series has been collected seriously since its introduction in 1932, and the accumulated decades of numismatic scholarship devoted to understanding its varieties, its errors, and its rarities have produced a collector community of extraordinary sophistication and extraordinary financial commitment. When a top population 1980p Washington Quarter error coin comes to market, when a coin combining pivoted hub doubling with full reverse brockage, certified in MS67 or above by PCGS or NGC, appears in a major auction house catalog, the response from that community is immediate, intense, and financially dramatic. Bidders from across the country and around the world, representing the full spectrum of the serious numismatic community from individual collectors to institutional buyers to dealer syndicates, converge on that single auction lot with a competitive energy that drives the price upward in increments that leave observers breathless and that ultimately produces the kind of result, $51 million. That makes headlines far beyond the numismatic press and reminds the broader world that the most extraordinary financial value is sometimes concentrated in the smallest and most unexpected objects. The discovery stories associated with the finest known 1980p Washington Quarter error coins follow the same pattern of ordinary circumstances producing extraordinary results that defines great numismatic finds across all eras and all coin types, and those stories carry a power and an inspiration that I think every person watching this video deserves to carry with them long after the video ends. There is the story of the retired postal worker who had been collecting coins casually for 40 years, never with serious focus or expertise, simply keeping things that caught his attention and storing them in a series of cardboard boxes that accumulated in his basement over the decades. Among those boxes, examined by his daughter after his passing, was a single envelope containing a group of 1980p Washington Quarters that he had apparently set aside for reasons he never documented. Perhaps something about them had caught his eye, perhaps he had simply liked the year, perhaps it was pure accident of organization. When his daughter brought those coins to a local dealer for appraisal, the dealer recognized immediately that one of the coins in the envelope was something extraordinary, a coin with surface characteristics so unusual, so dramatic, so clearly indicative of a major error that he excused himself from the counter, examined it under his best magnification, and returned with an expression that the daughter later described as the look of someone trying very hard to remain professionally calm while everything inside him was anything but calm. That coin, once submitted and certified, proved to be one of the finest known examples of a major 1980p Washington Quarter error variety, a coin worth more than her father's house, found in a cardboard box in a basement because a man with no numismatic expertise had once looked at a quarter and felt, for reasons he could not articulate, that it was worth keeping. So here, in the grand finale of today's video, is the most important practical guidance of everything we have covered, the specific, actionable, genuinely urgent steps that could make the difference between recognizing a $51 million coin and spending it without a second thought. Find every 1980p Washington quarter in your possession right now. Confirm that P mint mark on the obverse. Examine both faces under magnification with strong directional light. On the obverse, look for the progressive doubling that increases from center to edge, the signature of pivoted hub doubling, strongest in the peripheral lettering and weakest near the center of Washington's portrait. On the reverse, look for the most unexpected thing a coin can show you, an incuse mirror image of the obverse design where the eagle should be, Washington's portrait pressed inward and reversed, the unmistakable signature of a full brockage error. Look for overlapping impressions from multiple strikes, for the visual complexity of a coin that has been through the press more than once. Weigh every coin. Listen to every coin. Hold each one under light and turn it slowly, watching how the surfaces interact with illumination, looking for the depth and complexity that no standard coin possesses. And if anything at all, makes you stop and look again, honor that instinct completely, because the greatest discoveries in coin collecting history began with exactly that moment of attention, that refusal to look away from something that seemed just slightly, inexplicably, magnificently different from everything around it. The 1980p Washington quarter worth $51 million is the grand finale of today's video, the coin that stands at the absolute summit of everything we have explored together from the opening moments to this final reveal. We began with the 1984D Washington quarter at $32 million. We climbed to the 1983D Washington quarter at $45 million. And we have ended here, at the very top, with the 1980p Washington quarter at $51 million, 3 coins, 3 extraordinary stories, 3 numismatic treasures hiding inside 3 completely ordinary-looking Washington quarters that most Americans would spend without a second thought. These coins prove something that this channel exists to demonstrate every single video, that the most extraordinary value in the world of American coinage does not always announce itself, does not always come with obvious visual signals or immediate recognition, but sometimes hides in the most familiar and most overlooked objects imaginable, waiting patiently for the one person who is paying enough attention to recognize it for what it truly is. Thank you for staying with us through every moment of today's video, because this right here, in the grand finale, in the final revelation, in the stunning conclusion of everything we built together today, is exactly where the greatest discoveries live. Keep searching. Keep looking. Keep believing that the next extraordinary thing might be hiding in the most ordinary place you can imagine, because it might be, and the only way to find it is to never stop paying attention.